Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Happy New Year. So it is the 8th of January, and this is Security Plus SY0-701, Domain 1, Objective 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. Hope you all are having a wonderful Monday, great Monday evening, and looking forward to getting started. I'm going to give it a couple minutes to get a few more people in here, and we'll get rocking and rolling. Good evening, Jesse. Good to see you. We've got a few warm bodies out there watching. Thank you all for coming out. We'll go ahead and get rocking and rolling this evening. This is Security Plus SY0-701, Domain 1, Objectives 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. If you're having any trouble hearing me, if anything sounds off, just let me know. Music is too loud, definitely let me know as well. Hope you all are having a wonderful Monday night and Happy New Year. Haven't seen y'all since back before Christmas. Had 2 Mondays that were holidays in a row and decided to take those and spend time with the family. So we are back and rocking and rolling. So looking forward to getting going here with 701 with the new year. New exams going to be mandatory this summer. And we're going to slay this exam together. So our exam objectives. Got 3 objectives we're covering tonight. First one is to compare and contrast various types of security controls. That is 1.1. 1.2 is to summarize fundamental security concepts. That is pretty much the basis that will provide the foundation for everything that you're going to learn going through this course. And then 1.3 is explaining the importance of the change management process and the impact of security, which has a large impact on pretty much anything that we do in cybersecurity. Change management is going to be a big part of it, and the processes that go along with that. And Security Plus, from what I've gathered, looking at 701, it does touch on it a lot more than it did previously. But when you start getting into higher level exams like your CISA, your CISM, CISP, things like that, it's going to be a lot more in-depth on that change management process and the management of cybersecurity. But this gives you a good foundation and kind of the application and how things get done. And we're going to cover that later on this evening. So 1.1, our security controls. So the security control categories. You've got 4 categories of security controls. You have technical controls, which use a technology to solve a physical control problem. So things like your key cards, biometrics, pin pads. Encryption is even considered a technical control, even though it's not technically solving a physical control problem. It is protecting the data that is considered a technical control. And then the accountability, the accounting of what is going on, being able to log data and being able to look in and record that information for auditing later on, which would be a managerial control actually conducting the audits. So that is managing your risk. So you'll start to see a lot of these items, they will overlap a little bit. So managerial controls, you'll use stuff you collect or things you do in your technical controls, you will do as part of your managerial. You'll actually use the managerial controls to draw data out and be able to put data together and take actions based upon your findings and what you've determined from the things that you put in your technical controls. So your audits, risk assessments, planning, so disaster recovery plans, things like that, certifications, if you have any ISO certifications or anything like that, depending on the industry that you're in. Yeah, Jesse, a lot of this comes back in CISP. I had to put off my CISP exam. I was studying for it to take it in December. Had a few things go on personally that I had to push that date out. So I'm looking middle of February, and this actually preparing this information, being able to go through the Security Plus book as well as the CISP book to gather information. And it is a lot of overlap. There's a lot of review in there. CISP is a lot more about the management of cybersecurity as opposed to the application of the technical side, but there's a lot of overlap. Definitely cannot deny that. So getting into the operational controls, these are your policies and procedures. So different than your managerial controls, which are your audits and actual assessments. Operational, your policies and procedures are how your technical controls, how your physical controls are actually going to work, and how you're going to leverage those in order to become secure. How do you protect your data or your sensitive intellectual property? How do you protect the building or the site that you're working at? How do you protect your servers? So it's the policies that you put in place that you build all your other controls around. And then your physical controls, those are your physical items. So bollards, so the concrete posts that you see outside of stores that can prevent a vehicle from driving through the front door. Man traps, being able to prevent tailgating, fences, guards, dogs, all fall under those physical controls. Now, you may have policies that state how your guards actually go and how they patrol. You may have policies on how high the fences have to be when they're being built. And so those would be operational, but they consider their operational policies that apply to a physical control. And so my exam tip over here, it is something that you will see on the exam where they'll start to blur the lines in how they ask these questions. So while you have guards that are physical controls, but the orders, how they execute their duties and what they're supposed to do and the tools that they use will be different. So you'll have the orders, their duties, what they're supposed to do are their operational controls, and then the technical controls, their key cards, the biometrics, video cameras, things like that are technical controls that are in place to supplement the operational controls. So when we get into the security control types, again, there's more of the kind of overlap here. Preventative controls could also be they can overlap a little bit with deterrent controls and detective controls. So, I mean, you have something like, say cameras on the outside of a building. Those can be detective controls. They can detect if somebody is approaching the property or they've gotten past the fence. But they can also be deterrent controls. Somebody sees that camera, they may think twice about going onto the property, or they may see it and it'll completely prevent them at all. It'll keep them from ever getting there because, you spot somebody with that camera early, you're able to stop them completely as a preventative control, or you have deterrent control to keep them from even thinking about it, or you have the detective controls to be able to find them and be able to identify the violations. And then getting on with the corrective controls, you want to be able to, in the event that there's an incident, be able to restore back to your original state. So you're looking at things like backups, business continuity, disaster recovery plans. How do you get the business back to where it was in the event that, you know, security is breached, an incident happens, ransomware breaks out? How do you get back to where you were? So you have corrective controls in place in order to be able to get back to a restore point where you can continue business as usual. Compensating controls, these are things that will fill a gap when a required control is not possible. So things like network segmentation, policies and procedures. When you think about, like, in retail, you have point of sale systems, and often those systems, they're running an older version of Windows, or they're not able to be updated as frequently. So you want to have controls in place that, you know, you don't have a Windows 7 system sitting on your network that is completely vulnerable and able to be easily hacked, or you have a IoT device on the network that somebody can use as a entry point into your network. So things like network segmentation, you can actually put those on their own isolated network. You can minimize the blast radius if somebody does get into those. And you'll start to see a lot in things like I don't remember off the top of my head. PCI DSS is when you'll see a lot of the payment card systems where they actually do require network segmentation, a separate firewall, a lot of specific logging and things like that for these devices. But you may not be able to do those on the device, so you've got to have compensating controls. You got to have other things on the network in order to be able to fill the requirements for PCI DSS, especially 4.0, which is the new standard that just that is being pushed, I think, in March, is going to be in full swing. So we'll start to see a lot of development around that, and a lot of struggles as some of the retailers try to get up to speed if they haven't already gotten to that point. And then the directive controls, these are things like training and policies and procedures, which also fall under compensating controls. How you inform your employees and others about what they need to do to achieve the security objectives of the organization. So biggest thing, training, security awareness, those are part of the directive controls. It can also be policies on how a firewall is implemented. It can be some of the basic, just when you're bringing in that new piece of hardware onto the network, what do you do before you get to that point? And so it's the set of instructions, it's your playbook on how you get to that point before you actually plug it in and go live with a new piece of equipment or a new piece of software. Let me look at chat here real quick. Alabanthos, thanks. I'm looking for my first cert and I'm watching to understand which would be a good fit. Also between jobs, so certs that you can take even while not working would be preferred. Alabanthos, I mean, the biggest thing if you're unemployed is the cost of the exam. It's about $400. I think it's $395 if I remember correctly. And you can typically find a 10% off coupon just about anywhere. They're all over the place. And I think some people have bigger coupons from like the Google cybersecurity certification. They give you a discount code on the Security Plus. As far as certs that you can take when not working, and absolutely Security Plus, you can definitely do it. Especially if you have the time to set up a lab, start doing some hack the box, do some try hack me, things like that, and just kind of get a better feel for Linux and things like that. There's absolutely a lot you can do when you're not working. You can probably get through the material a lot quicker. I think CompTIA recommends anywhere from about 4 to 6 months to study for the certification. So, I mean, you could realistically do it in 1 to 2 months if you really put your mind to it and studied hard. That being said, for a first cert, if you have no prior technical knowledge, this may be a little challenging. You'll have a lot of networking to learn as well. in order to get through some of the more technical concepts as we get further into the lessons. But I mean, it's a great entry-level cert to get into cybersecurity. Security Plus is definitely where you've got to start. It's pretty much a requirement on every job. And then from there, I mean, let the passion grow and, you know, continue learning. It never stops in this industry, which is a beautiful thing. But let me know kind of what your technical background is, and we can discuss it more as we go on here. So get into security fundamentals here. So basic of cybersecurity. Oop, let me jump back here. All right, so the CIA triad. So the triangle on our right there. Confidentiality, availability, and integrity. So it is the basis for security. Everything that you do in cybersecurity is going to fall within these three. It's going to have something to do with confidentiality, it's going to have something to do with integrity or availability. So confidentiality is security and privacy of sensitive data or communications. Integrity ensures that the data is complete and unmodified from the original. So I mean, the file that I send over to Jesse is in fact the file that I did send to him, and nobody modified it along the way. Or, you know, the ISO for your Linux install, you can compare the MD5 hash on it and verify that it is in fact the exact same file that you downloaded is what they had originally published. So it's just verifying that that data is as it is intended to be. And then availability is ensuring that data and services can be used or retrieved when necessary. So making sure that, you know, you get hit by a DDoS attack, that you have a game plan in place, or you have a way to still continue to deliver services even if your primary server's down. You have load balancers, you have backup servers, you have ways to be able to provide those services or that data, and not lose customers or have downtime for your services. And then kind of falls along in with this non-repudiation. Essentially is a way to track that whoever sent something, it in fact did come from them, and they cannot deny that it came from them. So I say Jesse sends an email to his boss and curses him out, calls him all sorts of nasty names, and his boss comes to him and says, "Did you send this?" Well, if there's non-repudiation, if you are putting digital signatures on emails and things like that, you won't be able to say, "No, it didn't come from me," because it in fact came from your account, it came from you. But if it was somebody spoofing your email address or something like that, you know, then you may not have that digital signature. You'd be able to tell that, you know, well, this wasn't signed with Jesse's private key, so Jesse who sent this, it was somebody else that was posing as Jesse. So there's ways to be able to tell through message digests and through digital signatures that, you know, in fact, the person that did intend to send this did send it, and that, you know, they can't deny that they did or did not at that point in time. So the AAA, you will see this now, and you will see it pretty much forever through cybersecurity. Authentication, authorization, and accounting. So authentication is identity verification. You are who you say you are, and being able to verify that, and the system is able to validate that you are who you claim to be. Authorization is that the requesting party, the one that is authenticated to the server, is in fact permitted to access the data or services they're requesting. So you go and reach out to a server and you request a particular file. You know, you've authenticated to that server. It says, yes, we know that you're Taylor. They know that it's me, but am I actually authorized to access that file? So the authorization is a next step after the authentication to say, okay, does Taylor have the level of access necessary? Is he able to view this file? Is he permitted those permissions? And then the accounting. Accounting is becoming more and more prevalent, and this is not financial accounting. This is actually reporting to be able to validate that, yes, I put in this request. I did try to access XYZ on that server. You know, so-and-so had so many failed login attempts, and being able to look at that data and see what services are being requested, what services are being somebody's trying to falsely log into them. And so things like login reporting and access reports and stuff like that will fall into that accounting. Just being able to follow through on what is actually happening in your systems as far as the authentication authorization goes, and be able to track all that back to where it originates and when it was happening. And then I didn't really have a slide for this, but gap analysis. This is your control objective. So you have a point where you want to be, and then there's the point where you are. And the gap between where you want to be and where you are is the gap. And so you're going to go through and you're going to review, okay, here are our objectives. They're up here. We are currently here, and what do we need to do to get there? And where that gap is where you need to focus your energy and try and close that gap as much as possible, mitigating any weaknesses in your network and the security. So zero trust network access. This is a big one. This is really starting to become big in the 701. You'll start to see a lot more of this in some of the later chapters. You'll see references to it, and it kind of started out as more a marketing term than anything else, and it started to, and then finally it went beyond just becoming kind of marketing spiel, and now you're really starting to see a lot more implementation of this in a lot of networks. But essentially, your work computer, when you're logged in and you're like, say for example, my computer, I'm on my company VPN, they verified that, yeah, this is my computer and I do belong on the network. But when I try to access anything, I've got to use my login. I've got to do multi-factor authentication. It is a trust but verify is the biggest part of this. Is, you know, they trust my computer, it's on the network, but every time that I want to access something, they're going to verify that it's in fact me. They're going to give me a token for X number of hours that I can use to access systems. But if I try to access something that is more sensitive, they're going to verify again. And so they give me that least privilege access. So for example, if I log into something like Dropbox earlier in the day, but then I want to go into Splunk later, they're going to make me log in again because I'm going into something a lot more sensitive than just Dropbox, where I'm storing a couple Excel files. They're going to start looking at they're go, okay, well, Splunk, that's a lot more sensitive data. That's our network traffic and everything else. So we need you to verify again that this is in fact you. So that just-in-time service, the least privilege access, pretty much not providing those services until that point that they're actually necessary. So not just as soon as I log in the morning, providing that initial access right off the bat and giving me full carte blanche for the entire day. It's every time I need something, I actually have to authenticate to it. But kind of in the outburst of what I said, if I log into something like Splunk early in the morning and I want to go to Dropbox later, I don't necessarily have to log into that because I logged into something that was a higher access privilege, and they've already verified me for that period of time. But after a certain amount of time, it expires, and then I've got to do it all over again. So when you're working with this system, you've got a couple things. You have the data plane. Nope. Let me go back here. So you've got well, I can figure out the pen working here. So you've got your data plane and you've got your control plane. So control plane is essentially where your policies are sitting, where any policies that your administrators have put in place, permissions that users have, are input into your control plane. Policy enforcement point, maybe your firewall, maybe an actual server that is part of that policy. Essentially, yeah, the policy enforcement point. They've got it written right here. So anytime your system needs to access something, they're going to reach out. It's going to go to the policy enforcement point. The policy enforcement point is going to pass that on to the policy engine and go, is this person allowed to do this? If so, then they're going to forward it on to your resources. So it's, again, that trust but verify. It is essentially breaking it down to where you don't just have carte blanche access to stuff on the enterprise just because you're signed in for the morning. All right. So next on our list here is deception and disruption. So honeypots, honey nets, and honey files. I've gone over this in a previous video, previous stream, covered this same topic, and I actually like this diagram here, being able to essentially explain what the difference between a honeypot and a honey net. So a honeypot essentially is one server on a network that is exposed and maybe in a DMZ, but it is set up to mimic the internal servers and look like it is actually a valuable resource, or it looks like it is a entry point onto the network into more sensitive materials or sensitive servers, sensitive resources. So it is essentially set up to look like that honey for Winnie the Pooh to go search out, and Winnie the Pooh is our threat actor. So we want Winnie the Pooh to go for this honeypot, and we have all sorts of sensors and everything else on there so we can monitor how he got in, once he gets into that honeypot, what's he doing, and then from there be able to tell everything that's going on from that attack and take that data and learn from it. And similarly, on a honey net, you essentially have a separate network that the attacker can attack. And so you've got a network that may have fake telemetry. It may have network traffic that it's firing back traffic between these honeypots, these honey servers, and is making it look like it's a production network. So the attacker gets in there and they start running rampant. You have a whole lot of data to work with, and you know how to shore up your defenses without impact to your production network and without any loss to your business. So it is something that you will see set up in especially enterprise networks. You may not see it in smaller, like small medium businesses. And the other item is honey files, and essentially they will be something like sitting on in a S3 bucket. You have keys sitting in there. You have SSH tokens, or you have various sensitive data, and you label these files to look like something that you actually use on your network. But you don't touch them. You don't do anything with them, but you can set up rules in Windows. You can set up rules in Linux. You can set up rules in your intrusion detection system or your intrusion prevention system that when these files are accessed, it immediately reports, and you can see who's doing it, when they did it, how they did it, and then go back and look at the logs and be able to determine when an attacker has actually accessed, modified, or moved these files, tried downloading them off the server, whatever may be the case. So honey files are definitely an interesting thing, and I've got some documentation on that. Watched a talk on that at B-Sides Augusta, doing honey files and setting up windows to actually monitor it. It's really, really cool stuff what you can do with System Monitor and setting up file permissions and things like that. So, and then change management. So there's two different parts to change management. You've got configuration management, which essentially is the configuration and implementation of network resources and applications. And then you have the change management, which is a little bit further in depth than configuration management. So configuration management is kind of a part of change management, but this is your initial setup. You're setting up your baselines. You're developing diagrams for your physical and logical networks. So actual layouts of how your network is laid out, but also how things communicate across your network. Applications, what they utilize, how they communicate, what servers an application uses, how things communicate. And those diagrams are digestible on various levels, depending on the level of the person that is looking at it. So varying levels of technical understanding. You want to be able to make sure that these diagrams are understandable by C-suite, so you'll have something that's a little bit more broken down, very easy, simple to understand. Or, if it's a network engineer, they may want to have a very in-depth diagram. So these diagrams, you'll see a lot of them, especially in configuration management utilities. They'll have different levels of breakdowns that you can have for these diagrams. Some set them up automatically. Some of them you got to configure them and build them out yourself. But biggest thing is consistent naming and IP schemes. So if you've got a production network, you put all you may have say 10.200.20.1 through 255 is production, but then you have 10.200.21.1 is going to be your dev network. And so you're going to have different networks. You're going to segment these assets to make sure that they're not all on the same network together, but you're easier able to manage them. So if you've got an issue on one of those subnets, you don't have to take down the whole network, or you're not digging through production and development and test network traffic in order to see what's going on. So it helps keep things a little bit more clear, and having consistent naming, you're able to identify what assets are a lot quicker than if you did not have consistent naming and just everybody named everything after their favorite sci-fi characters or whatever they wanted. So having all your computers named after spaceships and the Death Star and Red 5, whatever you want it to be, may sound cool, but having something a little more consistent like BCTS001, and that's where you start your server naming for one of your production systems, is going to make a lot more sense, because whatever that acronym is, it's that particular server. And then as you start going up in the numbers, or you start changing the acronyms, what each thing is for. And then your baseline configurations, it's consistency. Consistency is key in making sure that you don't have configuration issues, and that you don't have problems with the putting new assets on the network or anything like that. You're able to track vulnerabilities easier because everything is going to be on a standard baseline, and you don't have any deviations from that. Or if you do, you're able to identify them a lot quicker, because when you have configuration management, things like that, you're going to be able to identify these assets that don't match your standard baseline. Change management is essentially following proper procedures, and when modifications to the IT infrastructure are made. So you've got processes, the approval process, you involve product owners, and you involve stakeholders. They're all involved in how the change management process works. So stakeholders will request a change, goes to a project manager, that goes into a change manager, which will go to the change board, or the can't remember what the RFC is. A request for change. Yeah, submit a request for change to the change board. So, and then change management process goes into place, and you update the plans after the changes happen. If there's no change, you let the requesters know, and then it goes into the change log, and then it can all start back over again until you get to a point where what their request is actually fits with the goals of the company and how things are supposed to go. So change management is going to be something that you're going to run into pretty consistently all through cybersecurity. It's something that doesn't really matter what level you're at, you're going to see some part of it. You'll start doing things like impact analyses, determine the possibility of negative impacts due to changes or lack of changes. So when stakeholders make a request and they want something changed, or they see that there's a problem, you'll do an impact analysis, see how that is going to actually affect the network and affect the production. And then from there, if we don't make this change, or if we do make this change, what's going to happen? What benefits are we going to see, or what negative impacts are we going to see? The backout plan is, as you start a change, being able to reverse those changes. So if you're doing updates to servers and the first server crashes, how do you get back to operational again and start back over at square one with redeploying those updates once you figured out why that server crashed. So you want to be able to get back to production as quickly as possible in the event that changes are unsuccessful. Maintenance windows, those are predetermined periods for network maintenance or interruptions. So a lot of the times it's after hours, it's when you're not at peak business. If it's for a website, typically it's off peak time, so it'll be in the middle of the night, or when there's typically historically low periods of traffic on that website. And then standard operating procedures, it's kind of self-explanatory. Those are your standard operations. Those are the basic guidelines on how you operate in the business and in your IT infrastructure, in your cybersecurity operations. So those are the base guidelines on how you're actually going to be executing, how you're going to do your change management, all those procedures and processes all the way through. Those are going to be your standard operating procedures. And some of these may be automated to where certain changes are just going to happen because they're low impact or they're no impact. So it's going to vary from company to company, but standard operating procedures pretty self-explanatory. Technical implications of change management. Downtime, and you can have servers go down. You're going to have to take stuff down in order to make changes. Services and applications will restart. Again, kind of goes back to downtime. Legacy applications may or may not be able to be updated. Things like that can be difficult to get to actually update or to be able to secure them properly. You may not have patches that are available for them. So trying to make changes to them can cause them to fail. So you got to take that into consideration when you're making changes on the network, that things may not work for older systems. Dependencies. You have an application that uses multiple servers, has a lot of different dependencies that it's looking for data from. Any of those going down can cause downtime. It can cause an application to restart. Restricted activities. You're going to be looking at things like, should this person be accessing this particular resource? Or by making these changes, did I open this particular resource up to unauthorized access? So making sure that when you make these changes, you don't have any regression in your security posture at that point. And allow and deny lists. This is something that I deal with in my job on a regular basis. Implementing these deny lists and making changes to them, and making sure that when we make changes that we don't leave anybody off of it, or that we don't add anybody in that shouldn't be there. But those can also cause downtime or lack of access to applications if not implemented properly. And then documentation and version control. This one is it didn't put my new image in there. So ignore the image here. So as changes are made, network or application diagrams should be updated depending on your configuration management database. Sometimes that's automatic. Sometimes as you update it, it will update those diagrams for you, but they should always be updated. Configuration items should also be updated. I run into a lot in my work where stuff gets moved to cloud and nobody updates the configuration item. So I have old IP addresses, things like that. It makes my job a headache, having to go back through hundreds of servers and figure out where they moved them to, what cloud provider they're on, and what the new IP is for them, how do I access them in order to essentially do identity management and things like that. Policies and procedures also need to be updated. Take into consideration lessons learned. So if you ran into any hiccups, or if you see that there's a better way of doing things during the changes, being able to update your policies and procedures to smooth that process out is also important. And versions of applications or firmware modified through change management should be tracked and monitored against the previous baselines. So version tracking, you see a lot of that in GitHub, Git repositories, and being able to track and see how these applications changed and be able to look at them and see, okay, when we made these changes to the program, did this affect our security posture? Is it working as well as it should? Those are the things you want to take a look at and things you want to keep in mind as you start making changes to applications or firmware for hardware as you go through in your security career. And that is everything. Thank you. I appreciate y'all coming out. And I've got a few questions prepared. So anybody that would like to jump on, I'm going to load up Vivox here and we'll get rocking and rolling with some practice questions. All right, so if you would like to join in and participate in our practice questions, join in on vvox.app, and the ID is 141-190-699, or scan the QR code on your screen, and you can participate in the practice questions for this evening. And so I've got 12 questions up and ready to roll, and we'll go pretty quickly through these, probably 2-3 minutes a piece, and let y'all get back on with your evening.
Hey everyone, this is Sandro. I hope you enjoy using my tracks. If you like what you hear, go premium today, and I promise to make.
Okay, so I'll give y'all another minute to get signed in here. And Alabanthus, I saw your message here about working in IT risk and controls. That's actually what I work in right now is risk. And I do a lot in access and identity management. So I'm definitely familiar with where you've worked. So definitely hit me up on LinkedIn. And we can definitely connect. I'll throw my LinkedIn address in here real quick. I just threw my LinkedIn into chat there. So definitely connect with me. And so we'll go ahead and get rolling on the questions here. So Susan's organization has deployed a zero trust architecture. Which of the following zero trust control plane components uses rules to determine who can access a service based on the security status of their system, threat data, and similar information? Is it adaptive authorization, threat scope reduction, policy-driven access control, or secured zones? That doesn't look like I have any participants right now, so I'm going to go ahead and roll on with the answers. The answer, policy-driven access control. So the policy-driven access control essentially is your policy engine. That is what essentially makes all the decisions based on a particular device's security state and other information that it's being given about your location, your behavior. So if you're logging in outside of hours, and you're logging in from Budapest, and you normally log in from South Florida, it can look at things like that. And it essentially is reducing the scope of the possible threats by looking at your normal behaviors and seeing, should we trust this login, and is this normal behavior for the user? And then from there, making those decisions whether to give you access to the environment. Next question. Jackie wants to implement a AAA system for her network. So authentication, authorization, and accounting system for her network. What AAA protocol is commonly used for network devices? We've got OpenID, SAML. So you got your security assertion markup language, Radius, or Tangent. On this one, the answer we would be looking for is Radius. So Radius is commonly used for your authentication, authorization, and accounting for network devices. OpenID and SAML are normally associated with federated services, and Tangent is not a AAA protocol or server. So Alex has configured full disk encryption for laptops that his organization issues to employees. What cybersecurity objective does this primarily support? Confidentiality, availability, authenticity, or integrity? So full disk encryption, is it providing authenticity? Not really. I mean, it definitely could make sure that the stuff on the drive stays authentic to anybody trying to access it. Integrity kind of falls in that same thought process. Availability, not really. Full disk encryption is going to make things less available if you don't have the encryption key. So confidentiality is the answer we are looking for here. Charles wants to reduce the threat scope of compromised credentials. What type of the following security controls is the best suited to meeting this need? He wants to reduce the threat scope of compromised credentials. So single sign-on, federation, multi-factor authentication, or zero trust. So kind of going back, looking through the lesson tonight, answer here is going to be zero trust, because you're looking at reducing the overall threat scope of compromised credentials. Things like multi-factor authentication can help. Single sign-on, if you don't have multi-factor authentication, that's just going to give them access to everything. Federation is also kind of part of single sign-on. You normally see the two used in conjunction. And so that's going to increase your threat scope in compromised credentials. So zero trust will leverage multi-factor authentication. But multi-factor authentication, though it is a correct answer, it is not the best suited answer for this question. So what information is analyzed during a gap analysis? Is it control objectives and controls intended to meet the objectives? Is it physically separate networks and their potential connection points? Is it compensating controls and the controls they are replacing? Or is it security procedures and the policies they are designed to support? So if you think back to that gap, so you have where you want to be and then where you currently are and that gap in between. So you have your objectives, you have where you want to be, and then you have the controls that you have that are intended to meet those, and you're not quite there. So that gap in between. So we're looking at A for the answer here. So log monitoring is an example of what control category? And I will admit, while I was digging through questions, this one was one that actually threw me for a loop, because I was looking at it as like log monitoring. That's gotta be a technical control. I mean, logs, it's technical. It's gotta be. Well, when you start to think about it, it's the monitoring part. Logging is technical, but log monitoring, actually putting those logs into use, is going to be an operational control. And then the policy for how those logs are monitored and used is going to be a managerial control. And then we won't have anything to do with a physical control here. But log monitoring is an operational control. Yeah, Alabanthos, I love finding questions that stump me. I normally can blow through some practice questions like crazy, but when I find those ones that I don't think about closely enough, or they just kind of throw me for a loop, I love throwing them in because that's how you learn. And you start to break these questions down a little bit further and understand what they're actually asking. So that's key for Security Plus, is being able to, and really any certification exam, is what are they actually trying to ask me here? So Bob conducts a periodic risk assessment of his organization. What category of security control is this? So periodic risk assessment of his organization. The managerial control, technical control, operational, or physical. This is another one of those that, okay, risk assessments. Where are we going to fall on that one? It's definitely not physical. I mean, risk, you're looking, yeah, there could be some stuff in technical that can help you with a risk assessment, but, you know, not necessarily the risk assessment itself. Risk assessments, yeah, physical might be part of a risk assessment. I mean, looking at your physical security, I don't know. It's not really the best answer for me. So I would, in a question like this, I'd be looking at managerial or operational controls. And our answer here is managerial. So risk assessments, audits, things like that are managerial controls. Remember, our operational controls are the processes put into place. There are processes and policies in order to manage technology better in a secure manner. But the things like your audits and procedures related to the risk management process are all managerial controls. So it's that fine line between managerial and operational, how those policies are used. That is what makes it managerial. So Marty wants to deploy a corrective control to deal with a recently compromised system. Which of the following would be considered a corrective control? Which of these would be able to correct a recently compromised system? So patching the vulnerability that allowed the compromise to occur, deploying full disk encryption, deploying an endpoint detection and response tool, or enabling logging and sending logs to a SIM. So this one's a little on the easier side. We wouldn't normally use full disk encryption to deal with a recently compromised system. EDR tool won't help you after the fact. It'll help you be able to identify that recently compromised system. And enabling logging and sending logs, again, it'll help you identify it, but it won't help you actually correct the problem. So patching the vulnerability that allowed it to occur is how you're going to keep that from occurring again. So that is going to correct the problem that caused it to happen. So in the explanation here, full disk encryption and EDR are preventative controls, logging and monitoring are detective controls. But just to break it down fully. So Isaac wants to deploy sensors to detect intruders in a facility, but he is concerned about the sensors being overly sensitive. What type of sensor is best suited to detecting intruders in an open office environment without significant expense or issues with sensitivity? This is a pretty small section. I didn't include it in the slides tonight. There's not a ton covered on this, but it is something that they at least want you to know what the different sensors are. So infrared, essentially being able to detect heat signatures, pressure sensors, so being able to detect changes in pressure in a room. So being able to tell like if a door is opening. It could also be on a door itself, being able to tell if that door is closed or open. Microwave sensor, And then ultrasonic sensors, ultrasonic detecting essentially sound, and then microwave sensors. Not 100% sure what you'd be using them for. That is something that is new to me, at least as far as Security Plus goes. But in this event, we would be looking at infrared sensors. They can cover broad fields and be able to be deployed without being overly sensitive. And so Jackie is performing an impact analysis prior to large-scale change her team is preparing to implement. Which of the following groups is not typically part of the impact analysis? So when you're looking at the impact of making a change, which parties are you going to involve? So typically when we looked at change management, we had our stakeholders that were requesting the change, system administrators that are going to be actually affecting the change, and then the service owners, the people that actually monitor these services, and they may have services impacted by a large scale change within the organization. So those three would be my top three that would be part of the impact analysis. Legal counsel typically won't involve legal counsel except for in events like you're doing business continuity planning or disaster recovery planning, things like that, but not necessarily in change management, unless there is something that is going to legally affect the company or cause major downtime or impact your clients in a negative way that you may have to bring legal in order to figure out where you stand when making those changes that are going to affect a large group of people that you may have contracts with or things like that. So legal counsel would be our answer here. They are not normally involved in the change management process. So using a tool like Git, so GitHub, things like that, is most frequently associated with what critical change management process? So we just talked about this a few minutes ago. You can use Git for a lot of different things, but typically version control is going to be your main reason for using it, being able to look back at past versions, being able to track version changes. Using Git is going to be version control. It could probably help with a backup plan, being able to revert to a previous version of a software or a patch, but version control, and that's going to be part of it. So version control is your best answer here. So yeah, backup plans might note that you need to return to the prior version, but we'll need to include how to do so. Stakeholder analysis and SOPs are not specifically supported or improved by using Git. And Christina wants to implement a physical security control that has the greatest flexibility in how it is applied because she knows that exceptions to security practices may be required at times. Which of the following solutions has the greatest flexibility? But which of the following solutions has the greatest flexibility? So you have video surveillance, video cameras, they flexible? Not really. Normally pretty hard. You can't really bend them or anything like that. But they're mounted in a specific place. So being able to change how they operate, things like that, may not be the greatest flexibility. Access control vestibules, once you put it in, it's there. You're not going to be able to change how it operates very easily unless you just opened it wide open. Then it's not really doing you any good. Access badges, if you require access everywhere, turning that system off could leave doors completely locked and you won't be able to access anything. So you wouldn't really have much flexibility with access badges. You either use them or you don't. And if you don't, you might not be able to get to where you need to go if you've shut that system down. But security guards are going to be the most flexible of all those security solutions because they're people. You're able to change their orders. You're able to to give them different tasks. You're able to work with them, but with that flexibility, also got to remember that they are also people, and thus one of the weakest points in cybersecurity as well. So when organizations need intelligence reasoning to be applied to security events, you want to have security guards, people to make judgment calls, be able to act upon a situation that may not be specifically written out. So that is everything I've got. We are rolling just past 8 o'clock here. And feel free, reach out to me and drop my LinkedIn link in chat there. Happy to talk. Find me on the Discord as well. Heck yeah, Chris. Team replay. I'm good with that. Team replay are people too. No, happy to have you along. I didn't have anybody participating in the quiz tonight, but I did give a little bit of time, and I kind of ran through some explanations and stuff like that on each of the questions, even though we didn't have any answers. Kind of a quiet turnout tonight, but happy to have you here and checking in for the last couple minutes here. So, but yeah, definitely hit me up in the Discord, Slay Security Plus. Find me on LinkedIn. Happy to continue the conversation and help with any studies and help you with your growth in this industry. We've all got a road ahead of us. I'm currently job hunting at the moment as well, and trying to apply to about 5 a day, so I can get about 150 applications a month right now until I land that role, doing something other than essentially data analysis and data entry at this point. But I've got some free time, so that's why I'm here. I've got a job that doesn't keep me super busy, and it gives me that flexibility to spend time with y'all and provide these lessons and be a part of the community. So I'm happy to be here, happy to share, and happy to give any assistance outside of these lessons. Anything you may need, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll keep rocking on and slaying Security Plus. Y'all have a wonderful week, and I will catch you next Monday, and I will see you on Thursday on Jesse's stream with Slay Security Plus.